Hello and welcome back to this little corner of the internet. I'm Varun from Swarga Tech, and in this video, we're going to be looking at the basics of how to use JSON with Unity. Now, most of you might have already worked with JSON or have a rough idea of what it is. And in this video, we're going to be exploring how to get this JSON data and use it inside Unity. So before we start, we're just going to look quickly at the basic structure of a JSON file. I'm not going to go too deep into what is JSON and so on. Just know that it is a very efficient way of storing data and transmitting data over the web. And that is all you need to know for this tutorial. Now here, what I have open is a sample JSON file. And you can see the basic structure of a JSON file is like this. It opens and closes with a box bracket. And each object is represented in these flowery brackets. And within these flowery brackets, you have the different fields. So you have the key here and the value here. So, and the key and value, the key stays the same. So you can see you have image name, sunset, you have an image description, and you have an image path, and the same thing here. So if I were to create a new JSON object here, I would just copy this and I don't know, let's call it sunrise. So we just change the values on the right and we keep the fields on the left the same because those are the keys. And of course, we have a nice image path field here. And this is the basic structure of a JSON file. Now, before we talk about bringing this into Unity, let's understand how this particular format is usable inside Unity. And for that, I have a diagram here. So here we have an image info class that I've represented in this diagram here. And here on the right, we have the JSON string that I just showed you. So this right here is the JSON string. And we have a class called image info. And how we communicate with JSON using JSON inside of Unity is we have to create a class inside Unity with the exact same names, with the exact same fields as the fields that are present here or the keys that are present here. So you can see there are three keys here: image name, image description, and image path. And our class is going to have the exact same fields in a string format. So all of these are going to be strings. Okay, so here we have our class and here we have the JSON. Now, to convert between these two formats, we use something that is inbuilt into Unity now, and that is called JSONUtility. And we do something called serialization and deserialization. And that is a very simple concept. So you have your class, you have an object with the image name, the image description, and the image path. And if we serialize that object, it becomes a JSON string. It's as simple as that. And alternatively, if I have my JSON string and I want to convert that back to an object of a class, we just deserialize that. And it's as simple as that. Now, if I come down here, Unity also provides inbuilt support through JSONUtility for serializing and deserializing lists. So if I have a list of these image info objects here, I'm going to be able to just simply serialize that into a long JSON string that you see on the right here by just applying the serialize method. And of course, if I deserialize this long string with multiple objects, I can get back a list of image info. And this is the foundational thing that you will need to remember as we proceed further. So just remember, you have a class with the same fields as your JSON object. You serialize to convert a class to JSON string, and you can deserialize the JSON string to convert it back to a class. So coming back into Unity now, we can get started with making our first classes for serialization and deserialization. And for that, I'm going to create a new script. Let's call that serialization helper. And we're going to keep this as a static class, or as a class with static functions, so that we can use them throughout the project without having to create objects. So, and that is very important when you make these helper classes. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove mono behavior. I'm also going to remove the start and update functions. We don't need that. And neither do we need, okay, actually let's keep these in there. We might need them later. So, and we are also going to make our class of called image info. And for that, before we declare the class, we will add a marker here called system.serializable. And that basically lets Unity know that we intend to serialize objects of this particular class. And this class is going to be called image info. And here we are going to have, of course, the three fields that we have in this particular JSON file. And always remember that they have to have the exact same name. So if you mess up the spellings here, it's not going to work. And all of them have to be strings. So we're going to have a, let's make it public string image name string. The next one is called image description. So we're going to get the image description. We're going to paste that here. And the last one is called image path. So let's also grab that from here. I'm just taking the field names. So perfect. So now we have our class with our three different fields which correspond exactly to the keys in the JSON objects. And now we can actually make our functions to serialize and deserialize our JSON. So the first function that we are going to write is to serialize an object. And serialization, as I mentioned, is the process of taking an object and converting it to a JSON string. So it's going to return a JSON string. So let's call it public. And these are going to be static functions, don't forget. So serialize image info. And here we are going to pass an object of type image info. Now inside this function, we're going to create an empty string or declare a string, and we'll call that JSON. And the function that we use to serialize the object image info into a string is JSONUtility dot to JSON, and then we just pass our image info object here. And then we will just assign that to the string that we have just declared here. So JSON is equal to JSONUtility.toJSON image info. And then we can just do if JSON not equal to null, we can return that string. Otherwise, we're just going to return null. And that's pretty much it for the serialization of an object into JSON. Let us also write the function to deserialize the object. So, and in this case, if you remember, I told you deserialization is when you take the string and convert that back into an object. So, in this case, we are going to return a public static image info, and we are going to call this function deserialize image info. And here we are going to pass a string JSON. So it's the exact opposite of what we did in the previous function. So let's create an object of type image info. So let's just create a new object there. And then we can do image info equal to JSONUtility. And in this case, it's going to be called JSONUtility dot from JSON. And when you do from JSON, you have to specify the type of object that you are going to be getting from the deserialization. So in this case, in these two angular brackets here, we just put image info, which means we are telling it that we want to take the string and convert it to an image info type. And then we simply pass the image info, we pass the JSON string into this function. And then of course we do a check to see if image info not equal to null. In fact, it's never going to be null because we have created a new object here. So we will just return image info. And these two are our basic functions to serialize and deserialize our JSON. Now that we have created our functions to serialize and deserialize, we are going to start by testing how it's working. So now you can see the functions that we had just created here, and I've also created another script now here, and this is called JSON test, and I've just created that here, and I've opened it up. And in JSON test, I've just created a public string called JSON, removed everything else and just kept the start function. So you can see here, I've declared an empty image info object, and img is equal to serialization helper dot deserialize image info, and I've passed the JSON with the function that we had just created earlier. And the best part about making these functions static again is that you can just use the class name and directly call the function. And what this is going to do is it's going to create an object, it's going to deserialize and assign it to this image info object. So let us also check if image not equal to null. We will log what we have just seen, what we have just got. So image dot name plus, I'm just going to create a separator here. And that's it. So this is just to show you that the object that we are getting has all the data that we need. So I'm just going to create an empty game object here. Let's call that JSON test. And I'm going to attach the JSON test script here. You can see I've created an empty field for the JSON string, and in the place of that we are just going to go to our JSON file here and grab the first element of this file and just paste that right in here. And now if I click on play, you should be able to see a log which says sunset, a beautiful sunset over the mountains and the path. So this means that it has created the object, it has deserialized the JSON and assigned it to the variables in the object. So let's try that with again another object. So I'm going to copy the next one here, clear that out. And if I click on play again, you will see the next object here, the ocean, and of course the description and the path of the image. Okay, so let's do the next thing now, which is deserializing a class into a JSON string. So for that, I'm going to open my script again, and we have our script here, JSON test. So in the same start function, I'm going to create right under this here, I'm going to create an image info object. Let's call that image 2. Okay. And we will initialize that with a new instance of the class. And we will just assign the different fields here. So let's call this dog image2 dot description, a dog sitting on a park bench, and we will just provide a path. Okay, so now that we have created this object here, we can just deserialize it. So let's create a string JSON, and we can rename this to JSON string, or let's call it deserialized JSON. And then we will use our serialization helper class, and this time we will call the serialize image info function and pass the image2 object that we have just created here, and we will log this. Perfect. So now I'm going to go back to Unity. I'm just going to copy this from our JSON file and paste it inside the Unity inspector, and I'm going to hit play. So in the console here, you will see two logs. The first one is, of course, the serialization that we did using this JSON string. So you have sunrise, the image description, and the path. And right under that, we have the serialized JSON string that we just created from our object here, which is the image2 object. We added these fields and we serialized it. And if I go back to Unity, you will see in the second log here, you will see that it has created a JSON string with the three fields. So now that we have serialized and deserialized one object of type image, let's take this a step further and learn also how to serialize and deserialize a list. So if you remember earlier in this diagram, I had shown you that you can also serialize and deserialize the list. So in this case, you have a list of type image info, and if you serialize that, you should get an object with an array of images in them. So if you look at the JSON here, if I open up the JSON file here, I made a small modification to this. I've just added a tag or a key here called images, and this is our array of images within these box brackets here. And we are going to be passing this entire list into our JSON string, and we are going to be able to get the list of images. So if we serialize a list of images, we can get the JSON, and if we deserialize the JSON, we get a list of image info. So let's quickly implement that now. Going back to our code, I'm going to open our serialization helper class, and you can see I've already made two functions here, but let's make them again. So this is going to be called this is a string where we are going to serialize image info list. So in this case, we are serializing an entire list, and the argument that we are going to pass here is a list of image info. And once we declare that, we just go into the function and we will declare a string JSON, and we will just call the function JSON equal to JSONUtility dot to JSON and pass our image infos list inside this function, and we just return the string. So similarly, let's also write the function to deserialize the image info, the JSON string into a list of image infos. So for that, we will do a public static list of type image info, and we will call this function deserialize image info list, and here of course we are going to pass the JSON string. So inside this function, we first declare an object of type image info list. So I've just created an object here called image info list, a class here called image info list with system.serializable, and this image info list object class has a list of image info declared in them. So that's pretty much it. And the reason why we're doing this is just so that we have a nice class which holds the image info list, and it's easier when we serialize and deserialize lists. And that is the reason why I've added this here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an object of type image info list, and then we're going to just create a new instance of that. And here we can immediately just call image info list is equal to JSONUtility dot from JSON this time, and the type is going to be image info list, and that is the one of the main reasons why we have declared this class, because when we use from JSON we have to provide a type, and in this case our type is image info list, which holds a list of image info as one of the members, and then we just pass the JSON string into this, and then we just return the image info list dot image info list, and this image info list is nothing but the class member here, as I mentioned earlier. So now we've completed our serialize and deserialize functions to work with the list, and let's copy our whole JSON string here, so the entire thing, and we will go to our JSON test script, And I've commented out the stuff that we did earlier where we were working with one object, and I've created a new public string here called image info list JSON. And this is where we are going to paste this entire string from the inspector. And before we do that, let's also write the functions. I'm going to actually clear this out. We don't need this anymore. I'm also going to clear this. So in our start function, we're going to be now deserializing our JSON string. So let's write some code for that. And we already have serialization helper ready. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an object of type image info list. And we're going to create an object of that, and we will do image info list is equal to serialization helper dot deserialize image info list, and we just pass the image info list JSON string. So we have an error here, and instead of an object of type image info list, I actually need to create a list itself. So let's create a list of image info, and let's call this image infos, and we will just put that here. And when you create a list, always make sure you just initialize the list. So you just do new list of image info. This is to make sure that we don't run into any null errors later. And once we do that, we can just make a small for loop here. And we'll use for each. And then we will just log let's log the path of each image info. So the image path. And always remember, we always have to do null checks before we iterate over any list. So if image info is not equal to null, only then we iterate over the list. So let's go back to Unity now, and I'm going to copy the entire contents of the JSON file here and paste it in the image info list JSON section, and I'm going to hit play. And we seem to have run into an error. And I think I know the problem here, and that is in our image info list class, we have a list of image info and we called it image info list, but here we called it images. So I'm going to have to call this image info list just to make sure that the key is the same as the member of the class, and this is very important. It's a good thing we ran into this problem here. So I'm going to copy the contents of this file again and paste it here. And if I click on play, you should see the three paths of the images that we have mentioned here. So our loop is working fine, and we have successfully deserialized the JSON string. So now that we have finished our deserialization of the list, we are going to now serialize an object of type image info list to JSON. And here you can see I've already created this for you. So this is just a image info list object that has been created, and there is a list of image info in this, and then I've just created the list at runtime. So you don't really have to do this, but this is mainly for demonstration purposes. If you're interested, you can just pause this screen and type this down. So we have created our image info list object here, and in the line at the bottom I have declared a JSON string, a string called JSON, and I've used our serialization helper class to serialize the image info list, and have passed the image info list dot image info list, which is here. If you look at the class here, which is the list of image infos right here. There is one small change that we actually need to do before we complete this, and there is a small mistake here. So let us go back to our serialize image info list function, and instead of having a list of image info here, we are going to pass a type image info list which we created here. So it's not going to be a list of image infos, but it is going to be an image info list object, and I'm sorry for that mess up. Okay, and then we just pass the image info list object into the to.json uh, .to.json here. Let's go back to the test script that we have made, the JSON test, and we will simply pass the image info list object that we have created here. So we're using a serialize image info list class and passing this object and just logging the result. So let's go back to Unity and play the scene. And as soon as I play the scene, you should see the JSON that has been generated here, the JSON string that has been generated here. And I can just copy this, and we can go online and look for a JSON formatter. So there are a bunch of JSON formatters that are available online. So you can just search for a good one, and you can just paste the JSON here. Let's remove some of these extra logs here. So I'm just going to remove this stuff. We don't need that. And on the right, you can see the JSON string that has been generated from the object that we just created. So I'm also going to show you one more thing. Let's copy that stuff again. Let's copy this JSON, and I'm going to paste it back into our image info list JSON uh, field here. Let's comment the serialization code and uncomment the deserialization. And let's hit play again. And of course, our JSON string is now serialized back into objects of type image info list, which contains a list of image infos. And you can see the log here that we did earlier. So this was the basics, the absolute basics of what you need to know to work with JSON inside Unity. In the next video, we can take this a step further by building a dynamic menu to display these images, and we can maybe fetch the JSON from an online source. So we can remotely fetch the JSON, build a menu out of it, and display it inside Unity. So I hope this video helped you understand the basic concepts of how to work with JSON inside of Unity. So how you take a JSON string, you see deserialize that into objects, or how you take objects and deserialize them into JSON strings. And this principle remains the absolute same whether you're getting these JSON strings from an API or whether you're fetching it from a file. Um Whatever may be the case, or just declared it inside the script like we did in this tutorial. In the next video, we're going to be looking at applying this further and creating a dynamic image menu using these concepts. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you in the next one.